This happened 2 years ago now. I went shopping at a very large mall that's fairly close to where I live. I had been there many times before and was mostly familiar with it. It was a weekend when I was there, and there were countless other people. I parked in a parking garage and then was inside the mall shopping for several hours. I got quite a few different things. So after I was finally done shopping, I started to head out of the mall. By this time, it was probably about 4 or 5 p.m. Things were much quieter now, but still a decent amount of other people were there. I left the mall to go back to my car in the parking garage. I remember that I had parked on like the 4th level. When I arrived at my vehicle, which was parked up against one end, there were not as many cars around as before, but I noticed something on my vehicle that seemed strange. I walked closer and I realized that there were multiple photographs taped to my car. Some were on the windshield and others were on the side windows. In total, there was probably 10 photographs. I was very confused at first and had no idea who would have done this. Then I actually looked at the pictures. Most of them were of me, and they were taken that same day as I shopped in the mall. Many of the pictures appeared to be taken at a distance, and some of them were zoomed in a decent amount. One of them was taken just feet away from me, and the person had clearly been walking directly behind me. It sent a shiver down my spine. I took all the pictures off of my car, then looked around the parking garage. All of a sudden, I was paranoid that I was being watched. I didn't notice anybody, but there were many possible hiding places. Then I got inside my car and locked the doors. I started looking at the pictures again. This was extremely creepy. I thought back to my time in the mall and tried to remember seeing anything strange. I really couldn't though. There were so many people there. It would have probably been pretty easy to take pictures of people without them knowing. I really had no idea who had done this or why, but I decided to just leave. As I drove out of the parking garage, there were not too many other cars driving around, but there were some coming and going. When I was descending down to get to the ground level, a car showed up behind me. After leaving the parking garage, I drove down this road near the mall. Then I got onto a ramp to go onto the highway. The only reason I noticed the car behind me doing the same thing was because it was following really close. And that's when I got suspicious that maybe it was the person who had been taking the photos. Of course, I also thought that maybe I was just being really paranoid. By now, there were lots of other cars on the road because this was a major highway. Still, I kept an eye on it. The car behind me was a kind of SUV, and it maintained a close distance. I continued with the drive for a while, which was to go on this highway for about 10 minutes. Then I would get off on an exit close to the city that I lived in. On the highway, nothing changed, but there was nothing too crazy about that. When I took the exit off the highway though, the car behind me also did. That's when I got really nervous. They had to be following me. So it seemed like someone, for some reason, was stalking me. I looked in my mirror, but could not really tell who was driving. I didn't have a good enough view. So now that I was off the highway, I was less than 5 minutes from my house, but I knew I couldn't go there. That's when I decided to drive to the police station. I wasn't sure off the top of my head where the nearest one was, so I put in the maps on my phone to get directions. The station wasn't too far away, so I followed the directions there. The car behind me followed as well, all the way up until the street before the police station. Then it stopped. I drove there, parked, and then went inside with all the pictures and reported everything that happened. I gave a description of the car, but I didn't get the license plate and couldn't tell the exact model of the car. I felt stupid for not taking better notes of those things. There was not a whole lot that could be done. After that, I went home. I was paranoid for the next few days, thinking this person somehow knew where I lived, but I was not bothered again. I even went back to that mall a couple of weeks later, and nothing happened. To this day, I don't know how to explain it. Maybe it was somebody's idea of an elaborate joke. I just hope that nothing like this ever happens again. I have a really bizarre story to tell. It happened a few months back. So there was this wedding coming up that I was going to with my wife. We were guests, and I had to go to a tailor for my suit. Obviously, I had no idea what tailor I was supposed to go to, but I remembered my wife told me that she knew of one that her family had been going to for years. That was fine with me, so the next evening after work, I stopped by. Now, on this day, I worked particularly late, which is something that occasionally happens. It was like 8 p.m. and dark outside. I put in the address to the tailor and followed it. When I arrived, I was in the parking lot of this old run-down looking mall. There were hardly any other cars in the entire parking lot. At first, I thought that this had to be a mistake. Then I looked on the map again, and it showed that the tailor was inside of the mall. I was already thinking of how I was going to tease my wife for having me stop at this abandoned looking mall. It said they were open though, so I got out of my car and walked inside. When I first got in the mall, it was a very strange feeling because the place was literally 90% abandoned. There were hardly any lights on, and there were countless closed up stores. Most of them were completely empty, but a few still had their signs up and some things inside. As you could guess, there was not a single other person in sight. I was even wondering myself if I was supposed to be in here. So I started walking the hallways looking for the tailor shop. As I was walking, I remember I passed by this one store. It looked to be a clothing store, at least that's what it used to be. It was closed, and it looked like it had only been closed for maybe the past year. I could see that there was still some merchandise inside, but it was messy and stuff. But I also noticed that the door to the store was propped open. I figured maybe they were in the process of clearing it out or something, but as I was looking and passing it by, I saw somebody was actually inside of the store. It was a man who was wearing jeans and a hooded sweatshirt. I remember that he was passing by the giant window, and then he looked over and he saw me. Then, after looking in my direction, he quickly turned and literally ran out of my view. I was now thinking that he was not supposed to be in there or something. What he was doing, I didn't know. I didn't really care either. I kept walking and I just ignored it. I turned and went down another hallway that was mostly abandoned as well. But finally, at the end of this, there was one sign lit up and in working order that said tailor. So I walked to the end and entered the store. It was in fact open and in business. I honestly couldn't believe it. So I went inside and I got my measurements and stuff and was in the store for maybe 10 to 15 minutes. Then I left and it was time to walk back through the quiet mall to leave. I went down the first hallway and then I turned into the next one. Now I was in the main first hallway that led out to the parking lot. I remember as I was passing by one of the clothing stores again, I saw that the door was still propped open, and the guy who I had seen before was still there. This time, he was looking right at me from the other side of the window. I thought that it was weird how he was just staring at me, but I ignored it and I passed him by. Then, right after I had passed the store, I heard the door opening and then footsteps. I didn't look back, but as I kept going, I heard the footsteps walking in my direction behind me. For some reason, this guy was now leaving the store and walking behind me. Was he following me? I didn't know. He did not say anything, and neither did I. I kept walking, and I soon reached the exit doors. The man was walking probably about 30 or 40 feet behind me. When I was going through the doors, it sounded like the man behind me was starting to speed up. After I got outside, I looked behind just for a second, and I saw the man fling the doors open at a fast speed. Right after seeing that, I just started sprinting from my car. When I started to run, I heard the man behind me starting to run as well. I went as fast as I could, and luckily, I have decent speed. When I reached my car, I stopped, got out the keys as fast as possible, and hit unlock over and over. Then I grabbed the door, opened it, got inside, and slammed it shut. After I had locked the door, the man reached it probably 2 or 3 seconds later. When he reached my door and tried to open it, I was starting my engine. He punched at the window twice before I was able to drive off. Luckily, it didn't break. I left and then called the cops when I got on the road. I reported what happened and was honestly very confused myself as to what had even took place. I went home and told my wife all about the event. Looking back, I really don't know why that man went after me. I'm guessing he was trying to rob me and was maybe trying to steal from the abandoned store as well. Since this happened, I joked with my wife for a long time how she sent me to an abandoned mall to get robbed. I did return to the mall to go to the tailor again, but I went much earlier in the day and was fine. But this remains one of the scariest moments of my life. I work at this small perfume store in a large mall. This mall has literally hundreds of stores inside of it. The store that I work at is one of the smaller ones, and it only requires one employee at a time. We sell all kinds of perfumes as well as a few skin products. Our store is open until the time the mall closes, which is 8 p.m. So one time I was working at the store until 8, and I would be by myself for the shift. Normally, the store is pretty quiet. Sometimes if the mall is really busy, we'll get a lot of customers, but usually there are not that many people in the store at once. I was sitting behind the counter, which faced directly to the entrance and a large window on either side of the entrance doors. The day went by as usual for the most part. We got some customers here and there, but it was mostly quiet. At probably like 5 or 6 o'clock though, something strange happened. I remember that nobody was in the store at that particular time, and I was just sitting behind the counter. Then I noticed this man walking past the store, and he was wearing this creepy looking mask. It was not quite a clown mask, but it looked sort of similar. He turned and then looked into the window at me and pressed his face up against the glass. It was quite creepy, but I figured it to be a joke and I laughed it off. He stayed at the window for an uncomfortable amount of time, probably over a minute. Then he finally stopped and walked a distance away. Before he passed by the store completely though, he stopped again and then looked in once more. He stared for a little while before finally turning and walking away. It was very weird. Over the next hour or so, I got a few more customers and we made a few sales. People would walk past the shop down the mall hallway all the time, but the later it got, the quieter it became. Then, at about 7 o'clock, I saw the man again. He walked past the shop once more and did not stop, but turned and looked at me as he passed by. It was very interesting, and I didn't really know what this guy was doing walking around the mall like that. I figured that he was probably messing with a lot of people and trying to get a reaction out of them. I didn't see the man for the rest of the time that we were open though. Then, at 8 o'clock, I went over to the entrance and I closed our 2 glass doors and then locked them. After that, I just had to finish up by doing a few things, and then I could leave for the night. I went back to the counter and would be able to leave in probably 5 minutes. As I was behind the counter though, I saw that the man was back. The same guy, still wearing his creepy mask. He stopped right in front of the 2 doors and started to stare at me. Then he came to the doors and tried opening them, but they were locked. After that, he started to walk away. I figured that he was leaving the mall. After all, it was now closed, and no stores inside would be open anymore. The man did not go out of my sight though. Instead, when he reached the end of the store, he turned around and walked back. Then he kind of started pacing back and forth in front of the shop and looking in at me almost the entire time. I tried my best to ignore him. Soon though, I was done with work and I wanted to leave, but I really didn't want to leave with this guy out front. I was hoping that he would just go away, but he didn't. After several more minutes with him still there, I was starting to get impatient. I hoped that one of the mall's security guards would see him and tell him that he had to go. By now, he was probably one of the last people left in the mall, if not the last. He continued to stand around and look at me every so often. Sometimes he would pace around a little, but he would never move out of my sight. It was like he was just waiting for me to leave because he knew that I was off now, but I wasn't going to. I didn't know who this guy was or what he was capable of doing. Before, I figured him to be harmless, but now I wasn't so sure. This went on for several more minutes. Then, finally, I saw one of the mall security guards come into my view in front of the store. He started speaking to the man. I couldn't really hear what was being said exactly. I could just really hear their voices. Not long at all after they started speaking, the masked man started walking away and went out of sight. The security guard followed. There was not too much of an interaction, and most likely the guard was just telling him that the mall was closed and he had to go now. Still, I waited a couple of minutes and made sure that the guy didn't return. Then I was finally able to leave the store. I walked the now empty hallways of the mall and then out to my car in the parking lot. When I got outside and into the parking lot, I remember looking to my left. One of the first things that I noticed was the masked man. He was just sort of standing around like 100 feet away. He was sort of near another set of entrance doors and was standing on the sidewalk out front. I just hoped that he would not look over and see me. I walked as fast as I could to get to my car, and I was able to get there okay. Then I quickly left. When I did, I saw the guy still standing in the parking lot. I don't know if he was waiting for me to leave or what. Maybe he thought that I was going to exit out of the other doors. But either way, I was glad that I was just able to get out safely and make it back home. And after that, I never noticed the guy again. I still wonder sometimes what his plans were. This happened back when I was a kid in the early 2000s. I remember it like it was yesterday though. So I think I was about 10, and I lived with my parents and two younger sisters at the time. We also lived about 10 minutes away from a huge shopping mall. I went there many times as a kid. One sunny Saturday morning, all 5 of us went down to the mall. The reason we were going is because my younger sister wanted to see some celebrity that was having a meet and greet or something. I don't remember exactly who it was or what the situation was, but I know that I wasn't really a fan. So when we arrived, the mall was very busy. My mom and sister got in line where all the other girls were waiting. Me, my dad, and younger sister went to walk around the rest of the mall and wait. My dad took us to the center of the mall, which had a large amusement park. We went to the arcade and played some games there for a while. After some time of this, my mom and sister were still in line with the large crowd, and my youngest sister was going to go on some little kids ride. I was hungry, and my dad gave me some money to go and get some food. So I left the area and walked down some crowded hallways. I was looking for the pretzels and walked for probably like 5 minutes away. As I struggled to find the pretzels, I was passing by hundreds of different people. I remember that sometime when I was walking, I felt a tap on my shoulder from behind. I looked back and there was a man standing there, but I didn't know who he was. At first, I was very confused, and I didn't know if he was mistaking me for somebody else. But the man said that he had to talk to me, and he motioned for me to go to the side. I went a little off to the side, away from where everybody was walking and in front of a random store. The man asked me what I was doing walking around the mall by myself. I told him that I was just going to get a pretzel. That's when the man told me that he would buy one for me and asked me to go with him. Now, I knew better than this, and I realized at this point that the man was a total stranger. So I told him no, and instead of continuing to go find the pretzels, I instead started to walk back over to my parents. I remember that at first, the man started to walk after me, which made me pretty nervous, but this didn't last long. I was able to quickly blend in with the large crowd by walking kind of fast. I lost the guy pretty easily. He didn't really seem to chase after me that close, and he gave up. I was able to quickly walk back over to find my parents. My mom and younger sister were still in line, and my dad and youngest sister were on the ride. So I waited for my dad and sister, and then I told them about what happened when the ride was over. Then the 3 of us went to get pretzels together. I was looking out for the man who had approached me, but I did not see him. Afterwards, we found a table near where my mom and other sister were, and we sat down there. After a while, my mom and sister were finally done. I remember that after that, we all went someplace else, I can't remember. But when we were going to leave, we were approaching the hallway that I had walked down where the guy approached me. The area was much more clear now, and there were multiple police officers, as if something had happened. We all wondered about it, but ended up just walking past it and going away. However, I remember later that day when we got home, my parents said that the police activity was caused by an attempted child abduction. After learning a man was arrested and seeing that it was near where the man had approached me, we figured it to be the same guy. It really creeps me out. But I also feel very lucky that I had just walked away from the guy when he talked to me. I'm also happy that the man was not able to successfully kidnap anybody. This happened back when I was a teenager and in high school. I was a freshman, and I lived in a house in the suburbs not too far outside of the city. It was a densely populated area, and we lived about a mile away from a pretty large mall. It was also about a half-mile from my school, so it was a popular hangout for a lot of the kids. I would go there with friends after school some days, or on weekends other times. One weekend, I was at the mall with 4 of my friends, Jesse, Alex, Martin, and Lisa. We walked around and did some shopping. Then we were all hanging out in one of the food courts, sitting at a table and talking. It was at this time when a random woman approached the table. She appeared to be in her 30s and had dark blonde hair and was wearing sunglasses. We all looked up at her, and the woman said that she needed to talk to me specifically. I didn't know why, because I had never seen her before. I asked her what, and she told me just to follow her. So I got up and asked her again what it was she wanted to talk to me about. The woman then told me to follow her and she would explain, so I did. By now, I was very curious. We went to the end of the food court and then turned into a random walkway in the mall. After walking for longer than I expected, the woman turned down this other hallway. This one, though, was very long and skinny. There were no stores down this hallway, but just some storage closets or possibly janitor's closets. I was very confused, but for some reason I kept walking. I also remembered that at the end of the hallway there was an exit sign. When we got about halfway down the hallway, I actually saw the door to one of the storage closets open up. At least I assumed that that's what those rooms were. When it did, these 2 men walked out. They were both looking at me and were starting to approach. Now, at this point, I still didn't know what was going on, but something about the situation gave me a bad feeling. I stopped where I was and I asked the woman what was happening. She just told me to come on and to follow her. The men now started walking in my direction. My instincts were telling me to leave, so I just turned around and started walking away. I heard footsteps moving after me and heard the woman tell me to come back, but I ignored it. This only made me go faster. I was able to make it back out to a normal walkway where there were a few other people around. I did not see the woman or the 2 men leave the small hallway that we had been in. I walked back to my friends, and they all asked me what that was about. When I told them what had happened, they were very confused. Then the 5 of us went back to the hallway to look, but the people were gone. So we started walking around the mall and doing a little more shopping. About 30 minutes later, I remember I noticed the woman walking a ways behind us. At that point, we decided to leave. It was very weird. Luckily, we were not followed out of the mall. After that, I never saw any of those people again. I'm not sure what was going to happen, if the woman was setting me up to get robbed or something. I really don't know. It just seemed very suspicious. I'm a female employee of a small shop in a decent-sized mall near where I live. Our store is so small that we only have 1 employee working at once generally. We're an actual store though, not one of those stands that are in the middle of the walkways. We sell mostly accessories and some shoes as well. So one day I was working and by myself like any other. It was sometime in the afternoon and the mall was pretty busy like usual. However, even when the mall was busy, we usually don't get too many customers. I was the only person in the store and we hadn't had anybody come in a while. At one point, a man walked inside the store. He casually made his way closer to where I was at the very back center behind the counter. Now, to describe the man, I would say that he was fairly short and thin. He wore a gray shirt and black pants, but they didn't seem to fit him well. He had a pretty bad haircut, to be honest, that was also rather messy. And as he got close to me, I could smell smoke and cigarettes. The man basically tried to pick me up. His method was pretty creepy though. He told me how he had been watching me today and he thought that I was beautiful. I couldn't get past the part where he said he'd been watching me. I don't remember the rest of what he said, but it wasn't much better. I was friendly to the guy until he suggested I leave right then and there and go with him. When I said no, he asked about when I got done, and I declined his offer in the nicest way I could. The man left after that, walking out of the store and going to the right. I thought that was that, only to see the guy reappear about 20 minutes later. He walked by and slowed down significantly to look inside right at me. I ignored this. The guy didn't wave or anything and just walked past. He came back less than an hour after that and pretty much did the same thing, but was farther away. I guess he really had been watching me. It was making me sort of uncomfortable, but as long as he didn't come in the store again, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. There were only a few more customers in the rest of my shift for that day. I tried to ignore what was going on outside, like if the man was walking by or watching me. Things went pretty smoothly for the most part. I ended up getting off of work several hours later. I left the store and started walking down the hallway to the parking garage where I always parked at. It was in the west side of the mall,
and it took me maybe 10 minutes to walk there. By this time, the mall was still pretty busy, and there were people all over the place. As I was walking, I made it no more than 100 feet before glancing behind me and seeing the same man again. It was a terrible feeling, knowing that he was still there and he most likely saw me. I kept walking towards the exits, checking back every so often, and each time that I did, not only was the man still following me, but he was slightly closer than before. There was still a number of people between us, but this guy was going to catch up with me eventually. What he planned on doing when he did, I had no idea. I decided to turn at a spot I didn't normally to try and throw the man off. He kept following me there. The thought occurred to me that I could find a mall security guard and tell them about the situation. The only problem was that it was hard to predict where in the mall the security guards would be. We had a decent number of them, but as busy as our mall got, many of them might not be available at once. I walked around trying to find somebody, with the man still trailing me a ways back. This went on for several minutes with no luck. I went down probably 3 or 4 different walkways and saw hundreds of people, but none of them were a security guard. I decided then to just leave. There were so many people that I had to be able to lose the man if I tried hard enough. I began walking faster and more erratic. I got some strange looks from people as I did, but I didn't even care. I went in one of the bigger stores that had a lot of customers in it and saw the man enter not long after me. I went up and down a few aisles of the store and then quickly walked out. Once I was out, I turned a corner extremely fast and then didn't notice the man after me. I had finally lost him. Still, I walked a ways further just to be safe. When I was sure that I had lost him, I finally started going out to my car. I made my way through the rest of the mall, which took a while because I was on the complete other side now. I was very careful and checked for the man over and over. I didn't see him at all though. At last, I had made it out into the parking garage. As I was walking to my car, suddenly, I saw the guy again. He was a pretty far ways away and wasn't looking at me. I quickly walked into the opposite direction, which is where my car was. I walked as fast as I could and finally made it to my vehicle. I wasted no time and got in, started the engine, and drove off. Luckily, I wasn't followed by the guy. I was able to make it home safely. I had the next few days off, and when I worked again, I didn't notice him at all. I haven't seen him since, and I'm hoping that I don't. When I saw the man in the parking garage, I actually think that it was a coincidence. He didn't seem to notice me, and he wasn't by my car either. Still, I will never forget the creepy feeling when I saw him there. Several months ago, I sat at a mall food court by myself. I was taking a break from shopping to have something to eat. The mall was very busy, and so was the food court, but I had a lot of shopping to do. I was looking at my phone as I was eating, and out of nowhere, I received a text message. It was not from anyone in my contacts, and the message said, "Hey." I figured that it was a wrong number, and I ignored it. But they texted me again, probably about a minute later. This time, they said, "I see you." I stopped what I was doing and looked up, checking around the crowded food court. Nobody appeared to be looking at me, though. I was sure that this was still a wrong number. I decided to text the number back, though. I said, "Who is this? I think you might have the wrong number." Very quickly, I got a response saying, "No, I have the right number. I can see you eating right now." This response sent a chill down my spine. This particular mall was not that close to my house, probably almost an hour away. I didn't know of anybody who knew that I was here and would prank me, like a friend or something. Plus, this was a new number that I didn't know. I once again looked all around the immediate area. There had to be hundreds of people, and it could have been anyone. It was basically useless to try and guess who it could be. I texted the number back, asking once again who this was. I didn't get a response after this. Now I wasn't really sure what to do. Was this just some harmless prank, or a creep stalking me? I didn't text them back, and just kept eating and minding my own business. But I looked up and scanned the area every so often, trying to find somebody looking at me. It would be like finding a needle in a haystack, though. A few minutes later, the number tried calling me. My phone was ringing, but I had no interest in talking to them. I declined the call. After that, I decided to leave the area. I walked away to keep shopping. I had quite a bit more to do. For the next several hours, I walked all through the large mall into many different stores. I bought a lot of things, and by the time I was done shopping, I forgot all about the random person texting me. I hadn't received any text since I was in the mall food court. I hadn't been called either. Finally, when I was done shopping, I went to leave the mall. I was within feet of the exit doors when I felt my phone vibrate. I didn't think anything of it and assumed that it was just one of my friends texting me like usual. I took out my phone to check as I approached the doors. The text was from the same unknown person, and it said, "Leaving so soon?" I couldn't believe it. I stopped and looked behind me. There was still a decent amount of people in the mall walking around that I could see. Again, nobody was directly looking at me or anything like that. I still had no clue who it was. I decided there to just leave, and I walked quickly out of the mall. I checked back to the doors to see if anybody followed me outside though. A few people did leave behind me, but there was no way of really knowing. Nobody seemed to follow me to the area of the parking lot where my car was, and I got inside my car quickly and left. I drove back home, which took about an hour. I was 100% sure that I was done with whoever this person was. Still, I had so many questions. How did they get my number? Why were they watching me? And most importantly, who was doing it? I wondered these things the entire drive back, but I still figured that it was all behind me. After getting home, I went inside and put the things away that I had bought. It was at this time when I received another text. This was pretty strange for whoever this was to still be texting me. They said, "Nice house." I thought they had to be joking. Just to be safe though, I walked over to the front window and looked outside. It was nighttime now, and I carefully peeled back the blinds a little. I saw a car slowly driving down the street past my house. The speed that it was traveling was much slower than cars normally would. Plus, my street is usually fairly quiet. There was no doubt in my mind this was the person who had been texting me. Obviously, I couldn't see inside their car, but I could see that the vehicle appeared to be a smaller sized SUV. It drove off out of sight and down the street. I texted back, asking again who was doing this. They didn't respond that time either, which was no surprise. After this, I finally blocked the number. I watched out my window several more times that night, but I never saw the car returning. Since then, nothing like that has happened. I still wonder about it though, and I haven't gotten any answers. Was it some random person stalking me? The fact that they possibly followed me for an hour back to my house just to drive by is really creepy. I don't go shopping at malls or things like that very often, but when I do, I tend to buy a lot of things. Clothes, electronics, whatever. There's a decent-sized mall that's maybe 10 minutes away from where I live, and I go there occasionally. The mall has quite a few popular stores, and just about anything you could want to buy. I went there one weekend, and only had a couple of things that I wanted to get for sure. I was open to buying other things though. As the day went on, I ended up finding quite a few things. I basically shopped all day, and by the time I was done, my arms were full with bags. I stayed at the mall until some of the stores were closing, and then I decided to finally call it a day. I walked back to my car, which I had parked at the top level of the parking garage attached to the mall. When I got inside of the parking garage, things were significantly less busy. There were far less cars, and when I got to the top level where I had parked, I didn't see any other cars at all. In fact, it appeared that my car was the only one parked there. I walked over to it, but when I got within maybe 75 feet, I heard a noise. The car was sort of around a corner, and the noises were coming from out of my view. I kept walking, and when I was maybe 50 feet away, whoever had been making those noises came into view. I saw about 4 or 5 people come around the corner. They walked sort of in front of my car, blocking it. One of the men started walking towards me at that point, and I had a terrible feeling. I knew there were no other cars parked up here, so the men were probably up to no good. Plus, most of them wore dark clothing and sweatshirts with the hoods up. Some of them, I could barely see their face. It was like they were trying to conceal their identities. One of the men held something in his hand, and I couldn't quite tell what it was. With all of my bags in my hands, I turned around and immediately started sprinting for the mall. I ran as fast as I possibly could. One of the men shouted something at me, but I'm not sure what it was because there was a bad echo in there. I don't think they chased me, but I didn't look back to check. I was able to make it back inside the mall, and when I did, I kept walking quickly inside of it. I looked back several times, but I didn't see any of the men. I don't think they followed me into the mall. When I made it back towards the center of the mall, I finally felt safe. There were a few people here and there, although most of the stores inside were closed. I waited there until there was basically nobody else left. Then I decided that I would try to go to my car once more. I made it there, and luckily this time, the men were gone. I still left as quickly as possible. Looking back at that day, I'm sure that they were going to try to rob me for all that I had bought. Probably my money too. I reported the incident on the mall website, but haven't heard back. This happened back when I was a kid. I was 7 years old at the time, and the year was 2005. It was summertime, and my family and I went on a small vacation to visit my cousins, aunt, and uncle who lived a few states away. I remember that my cousin Matt and I would hang out whenever we were in each other's city because we were around the same age. We also had many of the same interests, so I was excited to hang out with him. When we got there, we went to this huge mall that was right by Matt's house. The mall was so big that there was an amusement park in the middle of it. That's where my family and my cousin's family went, and we got the wristbands so that you could ride all of the rides that they had. We all went around the amusement park and went on several rides. Our parents were hanging out around us, and our sisters were a bit younger. I remember that at one point, Matt and I went off a little ways away from our parents to go on this one ride. The mall was really busy, and I somehow lost track of Matt. I don't remember exactly how, if I got distracted by something or if it was just too busy. All I know is that I was trying to find him, and I couldn't seem to. I walked around thinking that I would, and the next thing I knew, I was lost. At some point, when I was wandering around lost, this random guy started following me. I'm not sure exactly when I noticed it, but when I did, I continued to walk around trying to find anybody that I knew, like my parents or my sister. I think I ended up just moving farther away by accident, though. The guy behind me was wearing a black shirt and had glasses and sort of a beard. I don't really remember much else about him, though. Everywhere I went, he seemed a little ways behind me. After probably 10 minutes of wandering around the amusement park, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to just leave that area and try to get away from the man. I walked out into the large hallways of the shopping mall. I had no idea which way to go when I was there. People were all over the place, everywhere I looked. I walked over to this one area where there were escalators. I went up to the next level, and the man was still behind me. Once I was up there, I just kind of wandered around. I think I went into a store or two and then back out, but I wasn't able to lose the guy. After walking around on the second level for a while, I didn't think it was working, so I decided to go back down. I went back over to the escalators, and luckily I was able to find them again. When I made it there, I went back down and then into the amusement park again. I looked back and saw the guy still behind me. It's pretty crazy how he followed me for so long. I was so desperate that I decided to go on a random ride. It was like the first one I saw, and I knew the man wouldn't go on it because it was only for kids. I used my wristband to get on, and soon the ride took off. As the ride was going, I was wondering how I was going to find my parents again or get away from this guy. When the ride ended, I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw my parents walking over. I met them after getting off, and they asked me why I had gone on the ride. I told them how a guy was following me and I was trying to get away. When they asked me who, I looked around to point him out, but he was gone. I never saw him for the rest of the day, or again after that. I'm really glad that my parents showed up when they did. I don't know what that man was planning to do. I'm a 20-year-old female who works at a bigger clothing store in a large-sized mall. I've been working there for almost 2 years now, and I enjoy the job. I'm working there during my time in college, and I'm going into my junior year. This is something that took place last year, and nothing like it has happened ever since. It all started on a Friday. I worked that day, and I took the bus to and from work at the time. My apartment is not that far, but not close enough to walk. I have a car now, but didn't when the story takes place. So on this Friday, I was working and maybe 3 hours into my shift. I did a bit of everything from cashier to organizing areas of the store to dealing with returns. At this time, I was working near one of the displays, reorganizing things that had gotten out of order. The store was average as far as busyness goes. There were people all over, but it wasn't overwhelming. I spent maybe 10 minutes in this one spot and happened to catch this one guy staring at me when I was there. It wasn't a big deal, but it happened again less than a minute later. Maybe he thought he recognized me. I certainly didn't recognize him. I kept working, and only a few minutes later, there was a tap on my shoulder from behind. It startled me. I didn't know anybody was behind me. I looked and saw the same guy. He said hi to me, and I said hi. I asked if he needed help finding anything, and the guy just said no, and kept staring at me. I wasn't really sure how to respond. I just said, "Okay, let me know if you need anything." The guy just said, "Okay," and remained there, like 2 feet away from me. He was short, had really short blonde hair, and was sort of heavy set. He was also older than me by probably 20 years at least. I kept working with the guy standing right next to me. I could feel him just staring at me as I did. There was something off about him for sure. I finished work in that area, and then I decided to move to a different spot of the store after that, for obvious reasons. I didn't see the man over there, and a while later, it was time for my break. We had a break room, but on this day in particular, I decided to go into the mall to get some food. I had forgotten to pack anything for myself to eat, and we had a lot of food options in our mall. I left the store and walked towards the food court. It took probably between 5 and 10 minutes to get there because the mall is pretty big. As I was arriving in the food court, I spotted the same man from earlier. He was walking a ways away and looking at me once again. I was really hoping this was just a coincidence. I got in one of the lines to order and noticed the man get in the same line a few people behind me. I ignored it. After I got the food and sat down, the man went to a table a little ways away from mine. However, I caught him staring at me several more times. Also, he didn't have any food, so I guess he didn't order anything. Now, I felt pretty confident that he was following me. I was pretty creeped out by now. I took the food and decided to finish eating in our break room. When I was walking back to our store, I noticed the man walking behind me. I wasn't surprised by this, and I went into the store and headed straight for the break room. Luckily, once I was inside the break room, the guy would not be able to go in. I was able to eat in peace, and when I returned to work, thought I would find the guy inside somewhere, but I didn't. For the rest of my shift, I didn't notice the man inside the store at all. After work, I left and rode the bus home, all without seeing him. It seemed as though he had finally decided to leave me alone. I had to work again the very next day on Saturday. I remember as I was getting ready for work, thinking how nice it would be to not have that creep staring at me all day today. I left my place, rode the bus to work, and then got to the store. It's funny because only like 10 minutes after I started work, I saw the man again. I couldn't believe it at first, but sure enough, he was there. I was working at the registers, ringing people up. The guy was standing on the other side of the store. I didn't catch him staring at me initially, but that didn't take long. About 20 minutes later, he was still there, and I happened to glance up and notice him staring. He was in like the same spot as he had been before. Our store was much busier today with it being a Saturday. It was pretty easy for the man to go unnoticed, but I certainly had noticed him. I tried to just focus on each customer that I was ringing up. I was glad to be working at the checkouts because it didn't really give the man a chance to talk to me unless he was going to buy something. I didn't even bother looking over to see if the man was still there for a while. Hopefully, he would just give up and leave. Unfortunately for me, I was moved to work in a different section of the store a few hours later. We were very busy and I had more organizing to do. Probably 15 minutes into this, the man approached me. I hadn't known that he was even still in the store. He walked up to me just like he had before, and he said hi. I said hi back to him, and I wanted to ask him why he was following me all around, but I decided not to. I tried to keep it professional, and I just asked him what I could help him with. He told me he liked the dress that I was wearing, and after the man said that, he just kind of walked away. I just said thanks, and I was surprised to see him leave. And even though it was still really awkward, it was more normal than the previous day's confrontation. Still, I found him staring at me from a distance a short time later. When it was time for my break, only a short time after this, I stayed in the break room the whole time. When I left, I once again did not notice the man for the rest of my shift. I was happy about this, but I knew that didn't mean he wouldn't show up next time that I worked. The good news for me was that I did not work the next day. In fact, I didn't work for almost a week, so maybe the guy would show up, see I wasn't working, and then finally give up. Anyways, I left work, walked through the mall, and did some small shopping of my own. After that, I left the mall to catch a bus home. Once I got on, I sat down like always. I put on my headphones and went on my phone. But shortly after we started moving, I noticed that the man was on the bus with me. Now this was very concerning. I had never seen this guy on the bus with me before, and I knew that for a fact. It appeared that he was now following me home. I wanted to disappear, and I really didn't know what to do. But when we came to my stop a few minutes later, I got up and left, hoping that the man would not do the same. But he did. I had a few blocks to walk to get to my apartment, and I tried to go as quickly as I could. I had some distance on the guy, and he didn't seem like he was trying to walk extra fast or anything like that. Then, to my surprise, the guy turned a corner and away from me. Was he not following me? I felt incredibly relieved to see this. I still walked quickly to my place and got inside. After getting inside, I didn't even get a chance to do anything before seeing the man walking out in front of my place. He was on the sidewalk, and it looked like he was just walking past. But then he turned and headed up towards my building. I saw him standing outside of the entrance. I was hoping that nobody would let him in. My apartment building only had 8 units, and mine was on the 2nd level. Then the guy looked up at my window. I quickly ducked down, but I was sure that he saw me. I remained ducking down, just hoping that the man would walk away. Several minutes went by. I then decided to check out the window again to see if the man was finally gone, and when I looked, he was. But just as I was starting to feel better, I heard my doorknob turn. Somebody must have let the man into my building, and now he was right outside my door. Instantly, I was extremely worried again. The guy had just tried to walk in. The door was locked, and the guy then knocked on the door. I yelled at him to leave, or I was calling the police. I figured that he clearly knew I was inside here. Things then got quiet. I didn't hear him walking away though, so I didn't really think that he had left. I quietly walked over to my door and looked through the peephole. The man was still there, right on the other side. I quietly walked away from him and took out my phone. Then I called the police. As I waited for them to arrive, I went to my bedroom where I felt it was safer. I didn't bother to even try and listen to see if the man would try to break into my unit or if he would leave. When the police got there, the man was still right outside of my door. They talked to him, and he ended up leaving finally. After that, I never saw the man again. I'm a female, and I work at a clothing store at a mall, and this is something that happened over the summer. I started work at 12 p.m. and was working a closing shift. The mall is open until 9 p.m., but our store closed at 8 on that particular day. It was a Saturday, so the mall was really busy. We got a lot of customers throughout the store, and I was busy basically the whole time. When things started to get interesting, though, was at about 4 p.m. I remember that I was working at one of the 4 registers that we had, ringing up customers. A woman who I was helping told me that she wanted to let me know that there was a guy in the store that was acting creepy and suspicious. I told the woman thanks for letting us know, and when I was done helping her, I notified another employee. I wasn't quite sure what she meant by creepy and suspicious, but I knew that it wasn't good. And the description of the man was a white male with a green sweatshirt and jeans about average height. I glanced around the store, but I couldn't see all areas from where I was, plus the many racks and displays of clothing that we had everywhere didn't allow me to see all the customers, and I didn't see the man. Not even 5 minutes later, though, I got another complaint. Another woman said that a guy in a green sweatshirt seemed to be following her around the store. When I was done helping her, I decided to go find this guy and ask him what he was doing. I left the counter and started walking around the store. Eventually, I saw him near the back corner. He made eye contact with me for a brief second before looking away. As soon as he saw me walking towards him, he turned around and started walking towards the exit. Then he left. I figured he must have gotten the message without me having to say anything, and he knew he was doing something wrong and was going to get kicked out. I was glad he was gone, so hopefully no more of our customers would be bothered. And for the rest of my shift, everything went great. Things quieted down significantly after 7 p.m., and it was very calm for the final hour of work before getting off. There were 3 of us employees working, and at 8 o'clock the other 2 went home, and I stayed back to do a few things. We closed the store by sliding the metal barrier from both sides of the store opening.
My last job of the day was to go around the store and make sure that everything was relatively in order. It would usually only take me about 10 or 15 minutes or so. I would go around, sweep the floor, pick up garbage, and if any items were out of place or looking sloppy, I would fix them. Things were taking a bit longer because it had been a Saturday, so there were more things messed up than usual. I started in the front and then made my way to the back. When I was almost done, and at the very back of the store, I was looking through one of the clothing racks, and for some reason, I looked across to the other end. I was looking at the other back corner of the store, and then I noticed something. There was a man hiding behind a clothing display inside another rack of clothes, sort of looking out. I could just barely tell that he was wearing green. I realized that it was the same guy that had been here before in that moment. Thankfully, he wasn't looking at me. My heart started racing, but I tried my best to act normal. That corner of the store that he was in was the only section of the store that I hadn't yet cleaned or organized, and I was going to do it next. I sure wasn't going to do it anymore, though. After I finished organizing the rack of clothes that I casually walked over to the front end of the store. When I got there, I stopped and texted the mall security number. I hoped that they would have a quick response. I felt like I shouldn't leave the store because I was the only employee there, but I really wanted to. I stayed right by the front, about as far away as I could get from the guy. Soon, though, I heard a noise coming from the back of the store. As soon as I did, I ran to the gate and opened it, sliding it open just enough for me to get out, and then pushing it shut behind me. When I did, I just barely saw the man coming into view. I walked to the business next door and saw a security guard walking towards me from down the hallway. I waved him over, and in that same time, saw out of the corner of my eye behind me the man leaving the store that I worked at. I pointed at him, and basically the security guard had to chase the guy down. He did end up getting caught, and I had to make a report. I was just happy to be okay, though. Looking back at that, I'm so glad I saw the man when I did, because it's really creepy to think how he was hiding in the store alone with me as I was working. Last year, I went to the Mall of America. It's one of the biggest malls in the country, and I was visiting Minnesota from my home state of South Carolina. I was there to visit some family that I have, and the first day that I was there, I had to go check out the giant mall. When I got inside, I first explored some of the stores, and then walked through the amusement park that they have in the center of it. I was having a great time, but I remember right when I was leaving the amusement park going back into the mall area, some guy walked out right behind me. That same guy proceeded to follow me down the giant mall hallway for at least 5 minutes and then went up the escalator right behind me. Soon, it became obvious that he was following me. He didn't even really try to hide it. I mean, the only reason I was able to notice it so quick was because he was only 10 feet behind me, and when I stopped to look inside a store, he stopped, and then when I kept walking, he did the same. He could have easily walked by me. By now, when I was going up an escalator, I stood kind of sideways on it and then looked behind me to see who this guy was. He was sort of thin and had on a t-shirt and jeans. He also had longer red hair that was up in a bun. I took the next escalator up to the 3rd level of the mall, and so did this guy behind me. When I got to the 3rd level, I left the escalator and walked around to find the food court. After I found it, I sat down. I was hungry and I wanted to get food, but not with this guy right behind me. I sat down at a random table to see what the guy would do. He sat down at the very table next to me. Then I watched him look around as if he wasn't following me. Did this guy seriously think he was being inconspicuous? Because if so, he was failing miserably. After sitting at the table, texting with some family, and browsing my phone for a bit, I decided I had about enough of this guy. I stood up from my table and walked over to his. He didn't look at me at all until I was standing directly in front of him for a good 5 seconds. Then, he looked up with a surprised expression on his face. When he did, I said to the man, "Hey, why are you following me?" The man didn't even try to deny it, or even answer me at all. He just got up and walked away. I was surprised by this odd behavior, but I watched him walk all the way until he was out of sight. At that point, I was glad that he was gone, and then I was able to order some food and eat it in peace. After that, I wandered around a little bit more and bought a few more things at some of the stores, mostly some souvenir type of stuff and a hat. By the time I was done with my shopping and exploring the mall, my legs were tired from all the walking and I completely forgot about the man. I left the mall through a skyway and started walking to the parking garage where my car was. I was going to drive back to my hotel, about 10 minutes away, and the next day go to family's house. I was 1 level too high and had to take the parking garage stairs to get down to the correct one. When I started walking down the stairs and I turned the corner, I saw the man again that had been following me earlier. He was now just standing on the side of the stairs. He looked at me as I passed by, and after I did, he started following me again. I left the stairs for the parking garage and started walking to my car. He remained behind me the entire time. I was much more concerned now that I wasn't inside the mall where there were a bunch of other people. I turned around and said, "Are you following me again?" He didn't say anything back to me. He was just looking at me. Finally, he spoke. "No, my car's over here," he said. I didn't believe this, especially because of the fact that he had been standing in the stairwell until I passed, and then he magically wanted to leave the stairs. I didn't say anything back to the man and walked over to my car. He was following me at a distance of about roughly 40 feet if I had to guess. At last, I found my vehicle. I walked to the side of it, but was careful to only unlock it when I got right up to the door. The man walked to the third car down from mine, but he didn't get inside. He just kind of stood by the door. As soon as I opened my back door to put my shopping bags inside, the man suddenly walked out from the car he was next to and started sprinting towards me. I had no time to get to my driver's seat because the man was running so fast, plus it caught me off guard. Instead, I jumped into the back seat of my car and scrambled to press the lock button on my keys over and over. I heard the little horn honk, signaling that my car was now locked. The man arrived at my car, maybe 3 seconds after that. I was now in the back seat, and the guy tried opening the door. He was looking right inside the car at me, just a couple of feet away, and the only thing separating us was the window. The fact that we were in a parking garage with nobody else currently in sight made matters worse. I crawled over to my front seat to get in the driver's seat and start my engine. I heard the guy say from outside the car, "You're not going anywhere." He moved to the front of the car as I did, and when he saw me putting the keys in the ignition, he then moved to behind my car, I guess to block me in. There were other cars parked on both sides of me, and in front of me was a concrete barrier, so backing out was my only option. The man stood there just staring into my back window. After a few seconds, he said, "Get out of the car." I wasn't sure what to do, but I knew that I wasn't getting out. The guy kept standing there, and I was afraid he would try smashing the windows or something. I began honking the horn of my car. I kept pressing the horn repeatedly and holding it for several seconds as well. I was hoping to draw some attention to myself so that anybody in the area might notice what was going on. After I was honking for maybe 20 seconds straight, the guy actually walked away. As soon as he did, I backed out and left. When I was driving away, I was a little concerned that the guy would get into his car and follow me, but I don't even think he parked near me. I was able to make it back to my hotel safely. I don't understand though how the guy seemingly knew where I had parked, because he was just standing in the stairwell almost waiting for me. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but when I told my family about the experience, they said they were sorry it happened and ended up going back to the mall with me. That time, thankfully, none of us were followed. A few years ago, I was doing some shopping at the mall. I had quite a few things that I was getting, and I was there for a while. I would guess that I went to about 10 different stores inside, and I don't even want to think about how much money I spent. However, the story really takes place after I had completed my shopping. I left the mall at night when things were much quieter. Of course, when I had gotten to the mall earlier in the day, the giant parking lot was packed, and I had to park far away in the back. I left the mall, looked around for a moment, and then finally located my car. I walked over to it, and when I reached it, I saw a guy approaching me and my car from another direction. The man wore a gray jacket and had his hands in his pockets. To be honest, he came across as suspicious to me immediately. I reached the driver's door of my car and was about to open it when the guy reached me. He said, "Hey," and I turned to face him. The man then said that he was sorry to bother me, but was wondering if I could give him a ride. I almost immediately said back to him that I was sorry, but no, I couldn't do that. The guy seemed disappointed by this, but he didn't say anything back. He just kept standing there looking at me. I noticed that his left hand he kept in the pocket of his jacket the entire time. It might be crazy of me to think this, but I was afraid he had some type of weapon there, because when he was talking to me, even as he gestured with his right hand as he spoke, his left hand remained still and in his pocket the entire time. After the man was just standing there and not responding to me for a good 10 seconds, I just opened the door to my car, put my bags inside, and then I got inside. He kept standing there and watched as I started my engine and locked my doors. It was really awkward. I drove away, and it felt great to be leaving that situation. Part of me felt slightly bad for not helping the man, if he did just need a short ride somewhere, but I also knew that I would have to be almost crazy to do so. I drove out of the parking lot and got onto the road. Like the mall parking lot, the roads which had been busy earlier were now much quieter. I was maybe 5 minutes into my drive home, which probably had about 10 more minutes left, when I saw a car behind me was speeding up. I expected it to pass me by, but instead, it drove right up to my rear bumper and then just stayed there. I was in the right lane, and there was an open lane right next to us. I was curious as to why they weren't going by me. Finally, I had to turn off at the next exit to go home. When I did, the car behind me did as well. That's when I realized that whoever this was behind me was following me, and I immediately had an idea of who it could be. The car behind me was a smaller car and seemed somewhat old as well, like maybe from the late 90s or the early 2000s. I kept driving home, hoping that the car would stop. Then it started flashing its brights at me on and off. I took another turn to go home, and the car did as well. When I was driving down that road, I happened to notice that I would go past a local police station. At like the last second, I pulled into the parking lot there. When I did, the car behind me did as well. But as I drove right up to the building and parked, I saw the car making a U-turn and then driving away. I was so happy to see it leave. Once I had parked my car, I actually got out and then went inside the police station to let them know what had just happened. I answered some questions for several minutes, but unfortunately, I don't think I was able to help that much. I gave a description of the guy, but didn't get his license plate number. After that, I was able to get home safely. I'm guessing the guy was trying to possibly rob people leaving the mall. I'm not entirely sure why he chose me, but I think it's maybe the fact that I had several shopping bags in my hands, and it made him think that I had money. Either way, I'm glad that I got away from him. I went shopping at the mall last year. This was my local mall not too far from my house. I really liked it because it's big, always updated to feel new, and has basically every store and restaurant you could want. There's even a movie theater attached to it. So, to give some background of my story, I'm a 20-year-old female. I was home for the summer living with my parents. There was actually 2 sales going on at 2 different stores that I shopped at frequently in the mall. I asked a friend if they wanted to go with me, but unfortunately they were busy, so it would just be me going by myself. I would guess that I got to the mall at about 11 a.m. It was pretty busy, and after going to 2 stores and getting a few things, I went inside a shoe store. After getting inside, I was just kind of looking around. I was then approached by an employee. He introduced himself to me and said that his name was David, and if I needed any help with anything, to talk to him. He had brown hair, looked to be in his mid-30s, and was somewhat short. I told him I was good, but he proceeded to tell me about all the deals they had and asked me what I was looking for. After I told him that I was just kind of looking around, he asked me what my style was and things like that. He came across to me as a salesman who wanted badly to get me to buy something, but that soon changed. I flat out told him that I wasn't planning on buying anything there right now. In fact, I had already spent more money than I wanted to for the day. He said, "Got it," and then I thought he would walk away, but instead asked me if I went to school around there. I told him where I went to college and then started to walk towards the exit. David followed me. He asked me why I was leaving so soon, and he said that he wanted to get to know me a little better. This came across to me as creepy. I left that particular store and should have just went home then and there, but I like shopping and I went inside another store to look around nearby. I was inside that store for maybe 20 minutes and then I left. As I was walking back down one of the main hallways of the mall, I saw David again. This time, he was walking down the hallway headed towards me, but on the opposite side, and he wasn't looking at me or anything. I figured that he either had just gotten off of work or was on his break. Either way, I didn't want to see him. I looked away to the opposite direction and tried to walk behind some other people so that he wouldn't notice me. Once I was sure that he had passed me, I looked behind me to make sure. But then, I saw David staring right at me. I looked away quick and picked up my walking pace. Now I was actually going home. I walked down the hallway until I got back to the entrance of the mall that I had came in and then got to my car and left. I drove home and spent the rest of the night hanging out with my family and watching a movie. I went to my bedroom to go to bed at like midnight, but before attempting to fall asleep, I turned off my lights and turned on some Netflix on my TV. This went on for maybe 30 minutes, and it was about 12:30 a.m. when I heard a noise outside my bedroom window. It sounded like a tree branch was scraping against it, but in an unnatural way. I had curtains covering most of my window, but could partially see outside of it. When I glanced over, nothing was there. But just when I had turned my attention back to the TV, I heard a very similar noise again. This time, I saw something go in front of the window. It was just for a second, but I knew something was there. It was very unlikely for it to be an animal, too. I paused the show I was watching and locked my eyes onto the window. There was nothing there for maybe 10 seconds. Then I got up to go close the curtain. When I stood up and had taken about 2 steps over to it, I saw someone come into view. It was David. I jumped back in shock. How and why was he at my bedroom window? When he saw me, he looked surprised and ducked down below the window. I kept looking out of it. I wanted him to leave, and I could tell that he was just ducking below it to get out of my view. He got up after a few seconds and looked in again. Then he knocked on the window. I screamed and yelled as loud as I could that I was calling the police. David stayed at the window and put his hand up to his mouth, making the "be quiet" signal. My parents must have heard me screaming, because my dad then knocked on my bedroom door from the hallway. I opened it, and when he came into the room, he saw David at my window. My dad immediately sprinted out of the room yelling. I got my phone and dialed the police. My dad chased after David, and I heard a loud screeching of tires a short time later. Unfortunately, he had gotten away. My dad came back inside and said that he was maybe within 10 feet of reaching him. It's probably a good thing that he didn't catch him, though, because I don't know how dangerous David was, and it's best for my dad not to try to fight him, even though I'm sure my dad would have won the fight. The police got there a short time later. I was able to tell them all about David, a detailed description including where he worked, and that was enough information for the police. They were able to get David, and I feel much safer now. In 2019, when I was 15 years old, at least once a month, I went to a town close to mine to go to the dentist. It was always me, my father, and his girlfriend, until one day, while we were returning to our city, we stopped at a pretty big mall that was a few kilometers away. After entering, we ate and spent about 1 hour walking around and seeing stores until we decided that it was time to leave. When we got to the ground floor, we noticed that it was already dark and the mall was pretty empty, until suddenly I saw out of the corner of my eye that 2 men had come down the escalator with us. As we were walking towards the exit, I realized that the men were having some kind of conversation that sounded meaningless and inaudible. It was as if they made something up at the time, and after we left the mall, we started walking towards our car. The parking lot was empty due to the time, and our car was quite far away. I realized that the 2 men were looking at us, and then looking towards our car as if to see where we were going. With every passing second, I felt a little bit more scared, until finally we reached our vehicle. But a few seconds before we arrived, I watched the men get into a white 2019 Chevrolet Onix that was parked right behind our car. And a few seconds after getting in, the men didn't start the car or make any move. My dad noticed that. After we got into our car, my dad said to wait a bit. Everything was in a very awkward silence until my dad said to go back. Then we left the car and went back to the mall, while the white Onix lit up its headlights and then drove towards us. I noticed that even after we entered the mall, the white Onix sat in front of the entrance and the men were looking at us from inside the car until about 10 seconds. Then they accelerated and drove away. As we hadn't written down the license plate, the police couldn't do anything, so we didn't even file a complaint with the police station. The next day, my father told what happened to a coworker who used to visit that mall. The coworker said that 1 week before, a man had been kidnapped and killed nearby, and a witness gave a description of the same car with 2 men. I don't believe the 2 men were ever caught, and I think they may still be on the loose.